under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
What's going on, guys? Good evening and welcome to the program. It is another edition of Stateside Footy, and man, Monday night, it is the day before the World Cup kicks off for the United States, and of course that's coming this Friday night at 9 o'clock, and it's a little bit of a bummer just considering it's at 9 o'clock at night here on the East Coast. But that being said, one way or another, dude, I'm all for this smoke, right? Like, I'm all for anything that has anything to do with U.S. versus Paraguay. I have been waiting for the start of this World Cup for 8 years. As soon as this bad boy was announced in 2018, listen, obviously you couldn't factor 8 years into the future. But what I will say is, once this thing was announced, how could you not be excited? It's essentially been a countdown. Obviously, we had a World Cup in between, but nonetheless, man, I am absolutely fired up for this one. But tonight is going to be another fun night. Now, yes, we could do a pregame match, pregame buildup. And of course, we're going to be doing that on Thursday night as we get ready. We could talk in depth. We can even talk about the class of 94 because there is some chatter about some of those guys that aren't exactly too thrilled with the current squad. But I wanted to talk about the US-Mexico rivalry because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And dare I say it, this might be the best rivalry in international football. Now, of course, I'm biased. I'll be the first one to say it. I'm 100% biased. I do think that the U.S.-Mexico rivalry is up there with some of the best. And of course, we have England and Scotland. We have, we have Spain, Portugal. We have, Germany, Netherlands. We have a lot of very good high stakes rivalry in international football, but this one is the silent killer because for the last 40 some odd years, these two teams essentially have been trading blows over the course of decades. And a lot of this has to do with, player development, talent ID, and of course, the results that go along with whether it's Gold Cup, whether it's Nations League, whether it's Confed Cup, whether it's Copa America, whether it's the World Cup. This rivalry has seen some unbelievable matches along the way. Now, of course, for a long period of time, this bad boy wasn't even a rivalry whatsoever because let's face it, for a good number of decades, the U.S. was essentially lost in the forest for quite some time, and Mexico dominated. And of course, in those days, CONCACAF had only one automatic qualifier, and Mexico generally took that qualifier. But once Bora Milutinovic came over from our rivals, Mexico, of course, he had a stint with Costa Rica in between. Then all of a sudden things changed, and the United States not only felt like they could compete, but they became rivals, and we're going to get into all of that. But before I do that, do me a favor and please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell. We are 2 away from 500. 2. I'd like to hit that tonight if you could. If you can show the channel some love tonight, I would absolutely love it. The lucky 500 subscriber, I'm going to get a hold of, and I'm going to hook that person up with a jersey of their liking for doing it. It is a milestone, and I want to take care of those that take care of the channel. So whoever hits that lucky 500 tonight, I am going to take care of you. All right, let's go ahead and get into it, because I actually want to start with some news and notes, because I do want to talk a little bit about Chris Richards prior. Chris Richards has been training with the U.S. men's national team, and word is, at least what I'm hearing, is that he will be playing against Paraguay. And of course, Mauricio Pochettino did the right thing by not rushing him back against these two friendlies against Senegal and Germany. It wasn't necessary. When Chris Richards came in, yes, there was a little swelling, but of course the medical staff was able to get it to the point where not only was he running, but it's also about speeding up. It's also stopping. It's also about cutting. It's also about making sure that that thing is 100% bulletproof to start the World Cup. And by all accounts that I have been checking in on, it almost feels like Chris Richards will be a part of that starting 11 on Friday night against Paraguay, and that's absolutely a huge plus for this national team. Considering that we really don't have a like for Chris Richards. When it comes to other areas of the pitch, you may or may not be able to get away with it for a game, maybe two, but there is a drop off between Chris Richards and whoever is his backup. And so from that standpoint, having him in this back three is going to be absolutely pivotal to the success of this national team. We can talk about goalkeeping all we want, and yes, I'm sure we're going to get into that subject as well too, because I think I have my thoughts on this. But with the addition of Chris Richards, it is going to make things a lot easier, and especially when you consider we have a 39-year-old left center back that has clearly lost a step. Having a guy like Chris Richards being able to occupy large amounts of space in central areas, it's going to alleviate a lot of pressure. So there's that, and I'm glad we were able to get into that one. All right, so U.S. versus Mexico. Harry Nam Kuhn 3361 says, no way, U.S.-Mexico is the best rivalry. It is the best rivalry. Let's see. Dude, I can't believe I'm here, man. I know, Derpy. I can't believe it as well, too. And I said it right at the beginning. I've been waiting this since it was announced in 2018. And it was 8 long years. When it was announced, I really just couldn't believe it at first, that I didn't think it was actually going to happen this soon. Now, granted, 1994 was a long time ago, but that being said, could I have seen something like the UK hosting it, like Scotland, Ireland, Wales, England? Yeah, I probably could have seen that. Could I have seen Spain? Yeah, sure. You know what I mean? Like, we had South Africa and we had Asia, and we also had Brazil in 2014. So South America had hosted it. Could I have seen something like Saudi Arabia? Yeah, 100%. I just didn't know that it would be back in the United States this soon. I thought it would just be something else. But that being said, when it was announced, I was absolutely thrilled. And all we had to do was wait through Qatar 2022, and then bam, it was just 4 more years. And now, granted, this has been the longest 4 goddamn years. But that being said, we are here. As soon as that game against Germany went final, it's World Cup time. And of course, I will be back a little bit later this week as we do the pre-match build-up. And as always, we will have the live stream on Friday night. So it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And it's World Cup 2026. And man, listen, I hope we all can make some memories. And what I will say is that I've been seeing a lot of trash talking from Europeans online. A lot of it has to do with their own insecurities. And listen, I understand that a lot of English fans don't like their roster, may or may not like Thomas Tuchel, and of course, I think most Brits would rather have an English head coach than an outsider. Some are open to it. I don't know, but I think there is like a curmudgeon aspect to this, where I think a lot of people just assume that they're not going to win it, and so why not heap a whole bunch of crap on the United States and talk trash about our stadiums and our people. And it's like, listen, man, put all that to the side. Put it all to the side, because this only happens once every 4 years. And it is a celebration of the sport. And what I like about the World Cup, it is a celebration of nations, right? And I like the fact that it rotates every 4 years. So we actually get an idea of where football is in the world, especially outside of Europe. Most everybody, especially in Europe and South America, most people understand that predominantly the best football is going to come from those areas. But when it goes to Australia, or when it goes to Asia, or when it goes to North America, you get a bird's eye look at where the game is in these countries, where these national teams are. And it really is a very good it's a very good celebration of the game. And chances are pretty good that you guys are whining for no reason at all, because I think you guys will actually have a pretty excellent World Cup. But that being said, it's like, let's just do ourselves a favor and put all the bullshit to the side. It makes it a lot easier, man. It makes it a lot easier to enjoy it. But also, when you're coming over here and you're enjoying it, it's going to be a great time, man. Chances are you're gonna run into to cats like me that are gonna have a beer with you and just enjoy the moment for what it is, because it's a great celebration, man. That's what the World Cup is. It's just a fantastic celebration where you meet people from different countries, you have a good time, and you enjoy the football. So let's just leave it at that. Natesky, my guy, RIFC TID, Rhode Island FC till I die, my guy. I love it. Road to 500. I love it, man. Let's get there. Let's get there tonight. All right. So, U.S. versus Mexico is something that I grew up on, and the lineage of what this rivalry meant over the years, not just in terms of bragging rights, but it's also regional supremacy. And I got a little bit into it to begin it. And of course, I want to start back at the very beginning, because a lot of people don't know this, that at one point in time, the United States had the 3rd best league in the world. And this is where the rivalry actually begins. And this begins in 1921. And for about 10 years, right to the Great Depression, the United States had something called the American Soccer League. And the interesting thing about this league, it was predominantly on the East Coast, kind of like in the Northeast corridor, where you had the Bethlehem Steel and you had you had the Brooklyn Italians and you had some of these other teams. And the interesting thing about this is, doing some history on the American Soccer League, is that it was actually quite popular in the United States for like a good 10 years. And the owners of some of these clubs back in the day were actually paying big money, and they were attracting some of the best players to come play in the United States. Now, granted, it wasn't Major League Soccer as we know it today, where it's coast to coast. It was actually very, very much a regional league, predominantly on the East Coast. But these club owners were paying money, and we actually were attracting some of the biggest players. The interesting thing about this, it was only behind England and Scotland as one of the biggest leagues in the world at the time. And because of it, our national team benefited from it, because in those days, you didn't have to have a passport to play for the national team. All you needed was to live in the country. We had, for instance, in 1950, when we beat England 1-0 at the 1950 World Cup, we had a Haitian national that scored the goal. He was a dishwasher that worked in New York, wasn't an American citizen. And back in those days, you were eligible to compete for the nation in which you lived in at the time. And because of it, the United States started this rivalry with Mexico. Let's see, in World Cup qualifying for the 1934 World Cup, because in 1933, because of the Great Depression, the American Soccer League folded, and it was a year before, obviously, 1934, and so there were qualifiers, and this is where it begins with the United States beating Mexico 4-2. But then, to close out the 1930s, in 1937, this is where Mexico started absolutely building their dominance. And they had a successful run of friendlies that began a winning streak that would absolutely push for decades. And it was friendlies, a 7-2 victory, a 7-3 victory, and a 5-1 victory in Mexico City. And this is where Mexico absolutely dominated. And again, the interesting thing about this is, today a national team will play, 15 to 20 games a year. Back in those days, the national team, at least the U.S. national team, might only play 2 in 2 years, or might only play 2 in 3 years. And so games were far and few in between. And generally speaking, it was only the national teams at the time that actually had them. Because I'm not 100%, because I don't think Canada had one, and I don't think Jamaica had one either. And so it was literally like the qualifying were just the two nations that were there. And of course, Mexico absolutely dominated. And it's no surprise, because Mexican football goes back even farther. And it's something that, the Mexican heritage and the Mexican love for football is something that, even while we had a league, they also had a league as well too. And of course, you're talking about young kids coming from barrios, and in neighborhoods where obviously these kids would get noticed. Obviously, these kids would get scouted, and this is something that football is in the blood, and is like in the fiber, in the essence of the Mexican people. And it is something that, it's no wonder that they were able to dominate for as long as they did. And this domination is interesting too, because starting in the 1940s, following the initial victory by the U.S., Mexico would go unbeaten in their next 24 games between the two nations. The next 24 meetings, unbeaten, 21 wins and 3 draws. 21 wins and 3 draws. And the U.S. would not secure their second victory against Mexico for another 46 years. It would be in 1980 that they would actually get their second win. So understand, they get the first one in 1933 for the 1934 World Cup in qualifiers, 4-2 victory. They wouldn't get another victory until 1980, and this was for the 82 World Cup qualifiers in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We beat Mexico 2-1. 46 years without a victory over our southern neighbors. And it's interesting, too, because this was the era of Bora Milutinovic. Now, for those that don't know who Bora Milutinovic is, he is from Belgrade, Yugoslavia, and he is a very important person for Mexico, because he would finish his career for Pumas in 1976. So he started his senior career in 58, 59, and then he would retire in 75, 76 with Pumas. And he was regarded as somebody that was an honorary Mexican. He moved to Mexico, married a Mexican citizen, and he immersed himself within Mexican culture, whether that's mariachi, Mexican folklore, mañanitas, whatever the case may be. Like, he was that guy, and he was so popular that when he retired the very next year, he was coaching Pumas, and he coached Pumas so successfully that not only did he win a Mexican First Division title with Pumas, which is something that Pumas never wins. You know, Pumas is always that team that is always habitually like right in the middle. They will have a good year sprinkled in there, but like a good year is not winning the league. Bora was able to do it, and buoyed off the popularity of his career coaching at Pumas. He was given the job of Mexico in 1983, and he was given the job of the Mexican national team for a home World Cup in 86. And the funny story behind this is, originally the 86 World Cup was supposed to be in Colombia. And for those that don't know what was going on down in Colombia during those years, there was a guy named Pablo Escobar. I'm sure you guys know who that is. And he was a narco-terrorist. And because of the violence that was going on down in Colombia, FIFA pulled it. And there was a lot of corruption going on down there as well, too. And so in good faith, they couldn't hold the World Cup down in Colombia. And so it goes up for bid, and the U.S. and Mexico now bid for the 86 World Cup. And if you remember, in 1970, it was in Mexico as well, too. And the U.S. fumbled it. And they fumbled it so bad that all Mexico had to do was just remind them that they successfully hosted in 1970. And that's where the 86 World Cup would end up being, because they desperately needed a host city or a host country, and the U.S. fumbled it so bad. And if you also remember that in 1884, the NASL collapsed. And of course, that was the North American Soccer League, the League of Pelé, Franz Beckenbauer, Johan Cruyff, Georgie Best. All those guys were over in the United States. But the reality was that the league was propped up by big names. And there was no academies. There was very little youth soccer, and the Americans that were matriculating into the league were coming from college, and it just wasn't a sustainable model. And because of it, the U.S. men's national team suffered as well, too. And of course, that was during the period where they just could not qualify for a World Cup. And so without a domestic league, the United States tried hosting the '86 World Cup, and the binder in which they put together their bid was like akin to like a 13-year-old book report. A 13-year-old's book report. It was horribly put together, and FIFA took one look at it and was like, "What's this? Like this is crap." And so with that fumble, the '86 World Cup goes to Mexico, which means they're a host nation, which now means Concacaf is open for qualifiers. And the United States has a relatively young team vying for the '86 bid. It goes down to the final qualifier, and they're playing Costa Rica in Riverside, California, and all they need is a win or a draw, and they lose 1-0. And it just so happens that Canada gets their. That was in '86. That was Canada's first qualifying. That was the first time they qualified for the World Cup in '86. The U.S. all they needed was a win and draw. They couldn't get over the line. Meanwhile, Bora Milutinovic is putting together what is considered one of the best World Cup squads Mexico has ever put out there. And of course, it has Hugo Sanchez, it has Manuel Negrete, it has Felix Cruz, it has like some of the biggest names that Mexico has ever developed. And of course, some of these guys played with Bora at Pumas. And so this is a team that is widely considered one of the best Mexican national teams ever assembled. And of course, they get to their only quarterfinal they get to their first and only quarterfinal in their home World Cup in '86. But the interesting thing is during this time, the United States still cannot get past Mexico. It's something that it's just something that they, every single time these two teams meet, it was always an ass kicking. And it was interesting too, because if you listen to some of the guys that played on the '90 World Cup squad for the U.S. when they were growing up in the '70s, they never even heard about the national team. And when they did, it was them getting their asses kicked by Mexico, like by an average score of like 5-1. Like it was so demoralizing because we just could not get over that hump. And when we had opportunities to take advantage where Mexico is not in the field, it still doesn't matter. We just can't get over the hump. And so this dominance is something where it doesn't look like we're going to figure out a way to get into this, let alone not just the rivalry, but also figure a way back into the World Cup. But after the success of the '86 World Cup, Bora Milutinovic leaves, takes over Costa Rica for the '90 World Cup. And he is known as the type of guy, like the best way to describe Bora Milutinovic is, you guys have heard of Hervé Renard, right? He is the French coach that was coaching Saudi Arabia just up to a couple of months ago. Like, he is Hervé Renard. He is one of those guys that will hop to national team to national team. Like, he is one of those type of guys. And he was Hervé Renard before Hervé Renard. That's who he was. Meanwhile, the United States is really in an interesting position, because not only does the United States not have a top flight, their only soccer is indoor soccer. Essentially, it's essentially what indoor soccer is. It's like hockey with a soccer ball. That's essentially what indoor soccer was at the time. They had amateur leagues, like in '88, '89, they had the APSL and they had the WSL. But the reality is these are amateur leagues. Not a lot of guys were getting paid to play, and most of the national team that featured in 1990 were coming out of college, were either in college or coming right out of college. And Bob Gansler had an interesting decision to make. But in 1988, FIFA awarded the 1994 World Cup to the United States. And so finally, the United States gets it right a couple years after fumbling the 86 World Cup. And they were able to sell it with the promise that if awarded a World Cup, they would have to create a soccer league on the back end of it. And so it gave the United States at least 6 years, 6 to 8 years to put together the funding, put together the infrastructure for what would eventually be Major League Soccer. Because the thought was that if we host a World Cup, that it would generate the interest for a potential soccer league. And one of the bases for this is FIFA believed it because of the 84 Olympics. The 84 Olympics in Los Angeles, the soccer tournament was drawing 100,000 fans in the Rose Bowl. And it was off the back of that FIFA knew that not only would the World Cup work in the United States in 94, but it would also generate a buzz that would facilitate the support for a top flight, which would eventually come in the form of Major League Soccer. But off the heels of that announcement in 1988, the U.S. had to qualify for 1990. They absolutely had to. And it was something that they absolutely couldn't do. They couldn't not qualify because the real possibility of it is if the U.S. failed to qualify for 1990, there was a good chance that FIFA would pull the 94 World Cup from beneath them. If they failed in 1990, it would have been considered an absolute disaster. And so from that standpoint, Bob Gansler had a very tough task of putting together a team that would be competitive, but it would also be able to get through the gauntlet of that. And that period, the qualifiers were the Concacaf championships. But he made an interesting decision, and he elected not to carry a bulk of those guys that failed to qualify in 85. He only took a few of those guys along: Bruce Murray, Mike Windishman, and I want to say that Paul Caligiuri came a little bit after it, but Ricky Davis wasn't taken. A lot of the guys that were playing indoor soccer were not taken for that cycle, and instead, essentially, what ended up happening was Bob Gansler handed the keys over to the national team to a bunch of unproven college kids who had no professional experience, had no international experience at that time. So you're talking Tony Meola, John Harkes, Tab Ramos, Paul Caligiuri, some of these guys who are so very inexperienced. I think what's his ass? Daryl Armstrong might have been on that team. Let me pull that team up real quick, because that was an interesting team. And really, what ended up happening was the roster was laying the foundation for the 94 team. Yeah, Desmond Armstrong was on that team in 1990. Marcelo Balboa was there, and he was making his U.S. men's national team debut. Paul Caligiuri was there. Eric Eichmann, Chris Henderson. Of course, he's actually a big name in the United States. Casey Keller made his U.S. men's national team debut as well, too. And so from that standpoint, you're talking about Peter Vermees, Eric Winalda was on that. And all these guys were playing in the APSL. They came right out of college, and they were playing in the APSL. So the interesting thing about this is, well, a lot of these guys were playing amateur soccer. And so it was devised to turn the team over to a very young, very green, very raw group of guys to get through the gauntlet of CONCACAF, go to Italy with an eye on 1994. And of course, on, I think it was November 15th, 1989 in Trinidad and Tobago, in Port of Spain, Trinidad. And by the way, that '89 Trinidad squad had a young Dwight York on that squad. And of course, if you guys know who Dwight York is, he played for Manchester United. I think he originally started with Villa, and he was one of one of the best young players in Concacaf at the time. And of course, Paul Caligiuri scores the $1 billion goal. We go to Italia '90 as the 24th team. Now, of course, we lose every single game in Italia '90. But this is where the rivalry starts, because as soon as that World Cup ends, the U.S. Soccer Federation made a decision that they cannot be embarrassed at a home World Cup. They can't go onto the pitch and just embarrass themselves, against the Colombias, the Brazils, the Italys of the world. They can't do it. They can't have it. So they hire, essentially away from Mexico, Bora Milutinovic. And again, Bora is the type of guy that has a history of taking teams that do not look good on paper and gets them to compete above their weight class. And that was the history of Bora. And it was interesting too, because in 1991, this is the beginning of what is the Gold Cup. It was decided that they were going to put together the Continental Championship, and all the national teams that reside within the Caribbean, Central America, and North America would get together, essentially what seemed like every single summer. And I think back then, the Gold Cup was like once every 2 years. But in 1991, the Gold Cup was being played in the United States, and we meet Mexico in the semifinal. And the interesting part about this is that this is the first opportunity for Bora Milutinovic to lead the United States against his former team. We're playing in Los Angeles, California, which is a road game for the United States. Even though it's being played in the United States, it's essentially a road game. And of course, the LA Coliseum is packed with Mexican supporters, and the United States beats Mexico in a legit competition for the first time since 1980, 2-0, 2-0. And the United States would go on to beat Honduras, and they would win the inaugural Gold Cup. And it was from this moment where the United States finally laid a marker down against Mexico, in a match that for the United States, it was everything, because prior to that, there was no belief that the team would ever be able to compete with the likes of Mexico. Now, of course, Mexico missed the 1990 World Cup because they were suspended for fielding overage players in a youth tournament, and so FIFA came down on them and suspended them for the 1990 World Cup. So all signs were pointing for both of these teams towards 1994. So for the United States to be able to do that in that type of tournament, it gives them belief that we have arrived. And again, the interesting thing is that prior to this, the United States just had no no belief. They had no talent. They just couldn't hang with Mexico. And now finally in a major tournament in front of what is like really a home game for Mexico, we beat them 2-0. And this is where I believe the legend of 2-0 actually begins in 1991. And of course, Bora Milutinovic puts together what is essentially a club team for the United States, because we didn't have a top flight. Most of our players weren't playing club football at the time, with the exception of a few guys that were playing overseas. And that's our preparation for the 1994 World Cup. Of course, most of the Mexican national team was playing down in Mexico. Some of those guys were playing overseas as well too. And of course, right before the eve of the 1994 World Cup, we play Mexico yet again in I guess you can say a World Cup tune-up, and then we beat Mexico again. And so now all of a sudden, we're starting to beat Mexico. And it turns out that in Bora's, 4 and a half years in charge of the U.S. men's national team, we actually have a winning record against Mexico. We go 2-1-2, 2 wins, 2 draws, and a loss in 5 matches against Mexico. And, say what you will. Not a large sample size, but considering that we had only 2 wins prior. And those 2 wins were separated by 50 years. And Mexico dominated the entire confederation. And so for the first time, now all of a sudden we have a small sample size. We have a belief that not only can we go to a World Cup and show ourselves to be competitive, but now we can actually hang on a regional level. So after the 94 World Cup, and all of a sudden, the United States is buzzing for soccer. Off the back of the 94 World Cup, I think what the World Cup did for the sport in the United States was essentially say that there is a market for this sport. That if you build it, they will come, so to speak. And of course, in 96, Major League Soccer kicks off, and Major League Soccer's been around for 30 years now. But Bora Milutinovic leaves the U.S. men's national team in early 95, and Steve Sampson takes over as an interim, and we get to the Copa America in 1995. So the next summer, the U.S. and Mexico are invited down to South America to play host or to join the South American Championships, the Copa America. And these 2 teams would meet in the quarterfinal. And what was the nastiest match that I've ever seen. I highly recommend you guys go see this. It's available on YouTube, and it is one of the craziest matches you'll ever see. And it is violent. It's like watching a team full of Vinnie Jones play, because these 2 teams do not give an inch. They are tackling from behind. They're taking feet out from underneath each other. They're headbutting each other in the air. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. Mexico just assumed that they could bully the U.S. off the pitch, and the U.S. responded with violence. They responded to Mexico's violence with violence. We chose violence. It was beautiful. And the game goes to a shootout, and the U.S. wins in a shootout. And that was when you ask former members of the U.S. men's national team, where they really felt like the rivalry begins, they'll say Copa America 95, because that was when they felt like they really could compete, 100% compete without a doubt. And of course, off the heels of that, Mexico fires their head coach. Because it is it's unheard of, especially in major tournaments. It's unheard of to lose to the United States, but it happened. And we go to the semifinal. We go to the semifinal of the 95 Copa America. We end up losing. But considering that 5 years earlier, just 5 years earlier, we were playing on our first World Cup in 40 years. And so to see the national team from the United States side go from a team full of essentially college amateurs to 5 years later, 6 years later, where all of a sudden now we actually have professionals and we actually have a player pool, and we're going into major tournaments and beating Mexico, but also getting to a semifinal of a major tournament. It was a massive coup. But for Mexico, it was a little bit of a reality check, because for years they took it for granted. they took for granted that they were just going to be able to beat the United States like whenever. And that was like the splash of cold water to their face. The interesting thing over the next 4 years, two things happened for both national teams, and they were the iconic stars for both teams. For Mexico, it was Rafa Marquez, the center back from Zamora, and Landon Donovan from Redlands, California. Of course, Rafa Marquez would go on to captain Mexico in 5 World Cups. He played for Barcelona. He was playing with Messi and Ronaldinho and those dudes. Like, he was that good. Like, Rafa Marquez was a legit world-class center back, one of the best free kick takers I have ever seen. And Rafa, put the dagger in our heart more than one time. And of course, that was in what was it, Confederations Cup '99 down in Mexico. And we lost to Mexico in the semifinal. They beat Brazil. And to win a major tournament, which for Mexico was huge. It's something that they have on us. They were able to win a very major tournament like Confederations Cup against a team like Brazil, and it's still something that Mexico has on us. We've never been able to do something like that. Let's see. Have to use in the U.S. Yes. Have to use in the U.S. Yes. But Argentina versus Brazil, England, Scotland. Yeah. Listen, man. What I will say, Derma, is that those rivalries are fantastic. And listen, I might be biased. I very well might be biased. But when it comes to the hatred that fans have for both of those national teams, for the physicality that both of these teams, maybe we haven't seen that over the last 5 years. It's a little different now. Different mentality of soccer players these days, but it has the same intensity and rivalry as England, Scotland, Argentina, Brazil. That has the exact same intensity, and it means exactly the same. Let's see, Gio dos Santos, Giovanni. But the interesting thing, though, is with the advent of Major League Soccer, the U.S. were able to develop young players. Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley, Eddie Pope, Carlos Bocanegra. Listen, what was interesting, Aguchi Onyewu, Kyle Beckerman, Eddie Lewis, even Greg Berhalter, you know what I mean? Like Steve Cherundolo. We were able to, I guess you can say, fly a little bit under the radar, because what ended up happening in 1998 with the U.S. at that World Cup, we finished dead last in that World Cup in France. I think we only scored 1 goal. We finished, I think, 32 out of 32. It was, it was bad. And so going into the 2002 World Cup, there wasn't any really, there really wasn't any pub. There really wasn't any headlines for the United States going into it, because, I think a lot of journalists just assumed that we hadn't made any headway in the 4 years. And the interesting thing was, during World Cup qualifying in 2000, you had a legendary game where in Columbus, Ohio, and this is where, again, as far as the current, I guess you can say, the current legend of Dos Acero, this is where it starts in 2000 in Columbus, Ohio, where the U.S. were playing Mexico in 15 degree weather. And it's the game where what's his ass? Brian McBride goes up for a header, and Rafa Marquez hits him, headbutts him in the head, and McBride's eye swells shut. And the U.S. goes on to win that match 2-0, 2-0. And in this era, the U.S. and Mexico were trading wins because the United States could not win down in Mexico, and Mexico could not win in the United States. Like they would trade wins back and forth. Both teams had a home field advantage, at least for the United States. The first time we actually had a home advantage against Mexico, where we actually had predominantly most Americans in the stand versus them parking it in LA or Pasadena or Foxborough or Chicago, where it would be 60% Mexican. But going into that 2002 World Cup, we snuck up on a lot of people. And I think that was kind of reflected in our first match against Portugal, and we ended up beating Portugal 3-2. And that's when like Portugal had Figo. And a lot of, everybody had us losing to Portugal. And at that stage, that's probably the biggest victory that we had as a national team at that time, considering the stakes. Portugal was a good team in 2002. And we ended up finishing second to the group because, we were in the same group as South Korea. I think they ended up winning that group in 2002. And Mexico wins their group, and it just so happens that the stars aligned in the round of 16. We get Mexico in the World Cup, and it'll never happen again. It will never happen again in the history of the World Cup that the U.S. and Mexico will meet in the round of 16. Like that was one of those moments where the soccer gods opened up the heavens, and then all of a sudden these two rivals get to meet in the round of 16. And the interesting thing about this match was the Mexican press was already putting Mexico into the quarterfinal. Like everybody just assumed Mexico would beat us. And it was a beautiful sight to see. We score early. Mexico panics. They take off their center attacker like in the 30th minute to bring on an extra striker. Landon Donovan scores, and all of a sudden it's 2-0 in the World Cup, and we move on. We beat Mexico on the biggest stage. And from that moment, there was a massive insecurity when it comes to the U.S.-Mexico rivalry. Because it's not supposed to happen. Even at that point, Mexico just still assumed that they could beat us anytime, any place. It didn't necessarily matter. They were just better. And then they get beat. And it was a beautiful sight to behold. But the interesting thing, though, Mexico is still, churning out very good players. It was towards the end of the 2000s where we get Chicharito, where we get the Dos Santos brothers, and Mexico is playing well. We go down to, I think this might have been in 2000. I think this might have been 2009. It's either 2008 or 2009. We go down to Estadio Azteca, and Charlie Davies scores like within like the first 10 minutes, but we can't hold the lead. And Mexico comes back and beats our asses down there. But that was also the Confederations Cup that year, because we won it the year before. We won Gold Cup the year before. We beat Mexico in the Gold Cup final the year before, where we go to Confed Cup. And that's where we beat Spain. And that also was probably the biggest victory in our national team history. I don't think any victory that we've had was as big as Spain in Confed Cup 2009, because they were on the 35 match unbeaten streak, and they would go on to win the World Cup the very next year. But The interesting thing, though, is that their young team is developing. Their young team is developing, and post 2010 World Cup, and of course Mexico again has the same result in the World Cup. We have the same result in the World Cup. The one thing that I love about this rivalry is that we share the same futility in World Cups. We go in with hype. Of course, we hype ourselves up. Let's be honest, we do. The Mexican press hypes up Mexico, and we can win the group. We can get out of the group, and then we go out in the round of 16. Like it's actually kind of uncanny. And even when Mexico was dominating this rivalry, they still couldn't really do it. They still couldn't really take that advantage of player development and turn it into something that would be special. Like their two best World Cups came on home soil. Let's see. I do want to talk about the 2011 Gold Cup final, because that was the interesting final, because we go up 2-0 and we go up 2-0 in that match, only for Mexico to come back to beat us 4-2. And it was that match where Bob Bradley gets fired on the back end of it, and that's where we get Jurgen Klinsmann. Let's talk about 2011 Gio Dos Santos scorching the crazy chip goal. Oh, yeah, in the Gold Cup? Oh, without a doubt. Over Tim Howard. That was a hell of a goal, too. That was a hell of a goal. But it was kind of in this weird influx, because the United States were still having good results against Mexico. But again, it was interesting. Overall, by the way, from 2000 to 2014, the United States they were dominant. Let's be honest. They were dominant in this period, this little 14-year period between 2000 to 2014. The United States had 12 wins, 5 losses, 5 draws in that little period. And it was, for the most part, a dominant showing in the Gold Cup, World Cup qualifiers at home, and any other competition where we faced up against each other. It was also the era of the Dos a Cero chants, where every single time El Tri came to the United States, we would rain down with Dos a Cero. And there was something about playing in Columbus, Ohio, that Canada just could not Canada, Mexico could just not get over. But the interesting thing was that starting in 2015-ish, Mexico would go back up on top. And they started getting their footing back in the rivalry with a 3-2 victory in the 2015 Gold Cup, really. Both teams played in the Copa America Centenario. The United States would go to the semifinal again into another Copa America, losing to, I think, Argentina. But it was in 2018, where Mexico finally broke the Dos a Cero. And that was a 2-1 victory. And as a matter of fact, no, this was actually late 2016, because it was after Trump won election. I do remember this. When Trump won election the first time around, there was a World Cup qualifier in Columbus, and it was won by a Rafa Marquez header, 2-1, and that was such a very that was actually a victory that actually drove a stake through our hearts, because we actually didn't qualify for a World Cup that cycle. That started the qualifying cycle, and it would not end well for the United States. As a matter of fact, I think this might have been in 2018, 2019, where we ended up losing to Mexico again in the Gold Cup final. And then we lose again to Mexico 3-0 in a September friendly. And that was Mexico's first lopsided victory over us since, 2009? Yeah, so, Mexico in this little four-year gap would beat us 4 times. They would go 4-1-2 in that stretch. The only significant thing about this rivalry in the 20, I guess you can say the 2013 to 2019, 2020 era, was the fact that we secured our first victory at Estadio Azteca. And it came with Jurgen Klinsmann, where we went down there, I believe it was in a friendly, and we were able to win for the first time. That is actually our only win in Estadio Azteca, which is insane, really, considering how long these two teams have played. And that, of course, that gets us to where we are now. And the United States essentially has dominated this rivalry essentially since 2021. I think it's 3 straight Nations Leagues. I think a Gold Cup final, or two Gold Cups, 3 Nations Leagues. And and it's 5 wins to Mexico's 2. So that's kind of the history a little bit. But what I will say is that we've also seen something interesting from Mexico over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, and that is their player development. Now, of course, this is my belief. And for those that are tuning in on TikTok Live, maybe you guys feel differently. Maybe you guys here in the chat on YouTube feel differently as well too. Is the fact that Mexico, there's two big things that change Mexican football, and I believe it's for the worse. And that is, let me pull this up real quick. Is the rise of the super ownership groups in Mexico. And let's see. Yeah, because they for a while there, they were dominated by multi-club ownerships. And Grupo Pachuco owned a very big number of teams in the Mexican First Division. I think there was another one as well too. Who owns? I think it might have been the Payan family. Now there's just different ownership groups, but there was a time there where three major ownership groups owned the entire Mexican First Division, and they were essentially passing players around. Essentially transferring players, the better players around from team to team to team. They got rid of promotion and relegation from their third division all the way to their first division. And the unfortunate part about that was that I would consider it the heart of Mexican football. because you had professional teams in areas that weren't Mexico City or Guadalajara or Culiacan or Monterrey, these professional teams were responsible for scouting areas where the bigger clubs probably just weren't scouting. And because of it, they were able to bring kids through academies, bring them into their first teams. And of course, with the success of some of these lower division clubs moving up into the second division, up into the first division, it gained exposure to players otherwise they wouldn't. And because of it, they would move to bigger clubs and they would move overseas, whatever the case may be. And the interesting thing is that once multi-club ownership came into effect, and a lot of these ownership groups decided that winning was a priority, and that essentially giving playing time to young players, because they weren't going to put up with the patience of developing players. A lot of these roster spots, and it's still true today, a lot of these roster spots are occupied by foreign players. And the best young Mexican players are being paid a tremendous amount of money to stay in Mexico. So a lot of these good Mexican players really aren't making the jump overseas. But the other thing is that they're also scouting now in the United States because there's a lot of Mexican Americans, a lot of kids that are born in the United States to Mexican nationals. And obviously they're eligible to play for Mexico. And so you see a lot of Mexican scouts in the United States at youth tournaments, whether that be, youth international tournaments, whether that be club tournaments. You see a lot of Mexican scouts now, whether that be in the American, on the American West Coast, from Washington all the way down to California, or on the American Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. You see a lot of Mexican scouting influence in these areas. Not to mention the North and the East as well too, wherever there's big populations of Mexican Americans, you'll see a lot of Mexican scouts. And with this scouting model, it makes a lot of sense, because it also means that teams do not have to waste resources when it comes to finding players in Mexico, using those resources of putting them through their academies and spending money on their training, because they're already getting it in the United States. All you have to do is convince these kids to come play for you. And so from that standpoint, clubs in Mexico save a lot of money, because somebody else is doing their training, and all it costs you is in some cases, all it does is cost you either a small transfer fee or a small solidarity payment, and that's it. And because of that, I'm not saying that the Mexican national team is bad. That's not what I'm saying. But what I will say is that compared to the teams that they were putting out 30, 40 years ago, this team does not even remotely compare to those teams. It's good. Is it great? No, it's not. This version of El Tri is nothing compared to their 1970 squad, their 1986 squad. Oh, is that Jeff? What's up, buddy? Good to see you, bud. Yeah, I don't think that this Mexican team is bad. Put it this way. Do I think that they're going to win their group? Yeah, of course I do. It's not a good group. But is this Mexican team prepared to handle the pressure of advancing past the round of 16 or even getting to the round of 16? I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. That being said, I'm not 100% sure on the United States either. Let's be perfectly honest. I think we're good, but there's still a lot of question marks as well too. And I think the interesting thing about it is it's interesting to see how these two teams have their paths have kind of went down the same road over the course of the last 10 years, and what their federations have essentially turned into, and what their goals for their national teams are. They seem eerily intertwined. Where 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that was never really at all the case. It just seems kind of interesting to me. But that being said, it's like, which country is set up for the best long-term, the best long-term sustainability? It's a good question, because right now I think Liga MX might be a little bit better than Major League Soccer. But then again, the interesting thing though is that Major League Soccer is potentially going to be on the cusp of potentially doing something pretty amazing within the next 10 years, depending on whether or not, Major League Soccer takes off its training wheels and allows some of these ownership groups, to potentially either ramp up their player development or bring back American players, or just quite frankly spend money on foreign players. Me personally, I look at Liga MX as a little bit better because, when you look at what Club America and Chivas and Cruz Azul and what Monterrey are currently doing, the top heavy clubs in Liga MX compared to the top heavy clubs in Major League Soccer. Personally, I don't think there's any comparison. But the correlation between what these leagues are doing as far as spending and what it means to their national teams, it's kind of interesting too, because you look at the best players in Major League Soccer, and some of them currently are not even on our national team. And I would probably think that also holds relatively true as well too with the Mexican national team. The correlation to spending versus, how that manifests what on their national team. It seems kind of interesting. Any news on Pacha's future yet? Nope, not yet, bud. Not yet. Let's see. This is a stupid question. Are any of these Spurs playing on the UK team in the World Cup? Yeah, Jed Spence is playing on the UK team. And, well, Harry Kane is on the team as well, too, but he plays for Bayern now. But he was a Spur. Yeah, Jed Spence is on the English national team. Is that Rachel net deposited? Is that Rachel? Yes, I know who Rachel net deposit is. Rachel. So the outlook for both of these teams are going to be interesting, because one of the things that both teams should be looking at is their player development and their pathways, because one of the things that U.S. soccer is falling short with right now in their youth development is they're not developing high level youth nationals. The type of kids, i.e. the Landon Donovans or the Christian Pulisics, that by the time they're 15, they're already playing two ages up because they're the best youth player in their country. Where is Mexico's where's Mexico's next Chicharito? Where's Mexico's next Rafa Marquez coming from? The world class players that both national teams are known for. It almost feels like the U.S. Soccer Federation is more busy selling the game of soccer than it is trying to get the best coaches for their youth teams to make sure that the next 20 years of this national team are going to be 100% fruitful. It almost feels like they became a corporate entity selling a sport for their corporate partners instead of the health and the viability of its national team for its next 25 years. That's what the U.S. Soccer Federation in my mind looks like as of right now. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's certainly what it looks like. And it almost feels like the Mexican national team has kind of went down that road as well too. I guess the answer to it is which national team, which federation is going to look at it and look at the obvious and do right by its not just its national team, but it's also its top flight. I would like to say the United States, but I like a big part of me might just say Mexico. We'll see. But that's going to do it for me, guys. It's been fun, man. It's been fun talking US-Mexico. It's been fun talking US-Mexico. And by the way, let me throw this out for you real quick. The all-time leaderboard, 79 matches, 38 wins for Mexico, 24 for the U.S., and 17 draws. The best era for Mexico was in the 1970s and 80s, where Mexico went 10-1-1 against the United States. The best era for the United States was in the 2000s, when they went 10-2-4 against Mexico. Actually, let's see that they went. Yeah, it looks like they went 23-13. Excuse me. Mexico. Let's see. Mexico leads the all-time Gold Cup, 10-7. The United States obviously leads the Nations League, 3-1. And of course, we have the only victory in our World Cup, our one World Cup meeting. This is a rivalry that, yes, on the surface it is a soccer rivalry, but it also goes to the heart of just being neighbors and everything that goes in with being neighbors. And the fact that for the longest time, when we were continuously getting absolutely pummeled by Mexico, the U.S. finally stepped up and did something about it. And now it feels like this thing is going back and forth like every 5 years, which is great, because Concacaf, by the way, Concacaf is only good when the U.S. and Mexico are dominant and when they're throwing haymakers at each other. Like, that is when Concacaf is at its best. It's not when the U.S. is up and Mexico is down and Canada is kind of pushing and Panama is pushing, or vice versa. It's when the U.S. and Mexico are absolutely dominating and throwing haymakers. That is when this rivalry means something. Rachel Net Deposited said, when is the next U.S.-Mexico game? Probably not until this fall. Probably post-World Cup. There'll probably be a friendly this fall. As a matter of fact, that's a good question. That's a good question. Let's see. Yeah, there's nothing official yet. I would assume I'm assuming it's going to be post World Cup, probably this fall when the schedule comes out. All right. Well, that's going to do it for me, guys. But again, I am 2 away from 500. And again, for the lucky person that hits 500, I am going to get a hold of that person, and I'm going to hook that person up with a shirt of their choice, because again, 500 is a milestone. 500 is a milestone, and I'm very, very appreciative of the of those that have taken the time out to hit the subscribe button and hit those like buttons, getting the show in the algorithm. And listen, you've taken care of me, so I'm going to take care of you. So if I get to that number tonight, that lucky 500th person is going to get a shirt of their choosing. And of course, if we get to 1,000, same thing. And then, of course, once I get to 1,000, I'm going to be doing some really cool some raffle drawings as well too, and I will be giving away even more shirts because it's just what I like to do. So that's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday night. I will be back in a couple days as we get ready for U.S. versus Paraguay, as we kick off World Cup 2026. Of course, that goes down on Friday, and I'm looking forward to it as well too. And by the way, this is your home for World Cup 2026, because I'm not just doing the U.S. I will be doing a couple England matches. I will be doing a couple Scotland matches, because big up to the Tartan Army. And I'll probably be doing some Netherlands matches as well too. And if there's any cool matchups in the group stage outside of those, I'll probably be doing them. And then, of course, once we get to the knockout rounds, and if we get closer to the quarters, the semis, and of course the finals, those matches will be here on Stateside Footy as well too. So, listen, the World Cup, man, this is what it's about. This is exactly what we've been waiting for years for. And if you guys are fans of those nations that are competing, just understand that I hope you guys do well, because let me tell you what a good World Cup will do for the morale of your country, and especially the winning nation as well too. So this is why I love the World Cup so much, because it is a unifying global tournament. And you get to hang out with really cool people from around the world. And, what other sporting tournament do you get to do that? So outside of the Olympics and the World Cup. So, all right, guys, have a great night. I'll see you guys in a couple days.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.